Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Higher Ed Power BI user group. Um, Hope you enjoyed the music. That's from the movie The River Runs Through It. It's got fly fishermen in Montana. Little known fact about me is I'm a pretty avid fly fisherman, and I have fly fished in Montana, and that's pretty much the perfect music for that pastime. Even though opinions about that movie are kind of divided in the fly fishing community. Anyway, so if you're coming to us for the first time, the mission of the Higher Ed Power BI user group is to train, educate, and connect data professionals who work with Microsoft Power BI at colleges and universities in the United States and elsewhere. We invite you to join the conversation on Slack. Here's a QR code that you can scan. We have a Slack workspace where you can come and ask questions, contribute to the discussion. We'd love to hear from you on Slack. So, as per usual, we will talk about the latest version of the Power BI desktop and Power BI service. So, if you're using the Power BI Cloud, the latest version is April 2024. We just got a new release about 4 weeks ago. Not many features, not a bunch of stuff, but we did get some new visuals, like the 100% stacked area chart, which you can see in the screenshot on the right. It's actually not my screenshot, it's Microsoft's. I just stole it from their website. There are several new enhancements to the line chart visual, which give it some interesting new variations if you want to use line charts. And you can now organize content in the Power BI Cloud into folders. And that seems like a really small thing, like, ooh, folders, man, that's amazing. But it's actually a feature that's been requested by the Power BI community for years. And the overlords in Redmond, Washington finally saw fit to give us that feature. So if you've got a cloud workspace on powerbi.com, you can now create folders in that workspace and help organize your content a little bit better. So that's actually a good feature and something that you would probably see if you're using the Power BI cloud. There were some really huge announcements coming out of some of the Microsoft conferences, like the Fabric convention in Las Vegas last month, and we're kind of convention season right now for Microsoft things. There's a lot of great stuff coming down the pipeline for Power BI in the next year. You're going to see a lot more announcements. So expect that going forward, these slides are going to have a lot more interesting stuff on them. So, on the other hand, speaking of stuff that is not so interesting, Power BI Report Server continues to have very little going on for it. The latest version is January 2024, but expect a new release in May of 2024. So we'll probably have a couple of odds and ends in it, but I think Microsoft has made it pretty clear that Power BI Report Server is on the way out, especially with some of the announcements that they've made with retiring some of the premium Power BI premium capacity SKUs and migrating people onto Fabric SKUs. It sounds like Power BI Report Server is going to be harder to get your hands on in the future, unless you're using what they call software assurance plans. So we're not sure exactly what the future is for Power BI Report Server, but it just seems to me that it's becoming less and less and less of a thing, and they're trying to encourage people to move more and more to the Power BI cloud. Some general announcements. First of all, we passed 500 members since our last meetup, and that's great. That's a huge milestone, and I want to thank everyone for joining up and making that possible. Also, we are pleased to announce that James Bartlett from Des Moines University has agreed to join the leadership team. This is really exciting for me. I've been following James on LinkedIn for a while. He's a really big contributor in the Power BI community, especially with some of his PowerShell automations. And he was recently awarded Microsoft MVP for the first time, which is a big deal in the Microsoft community. So we're really glad to have a big time contributor and thought leader like James joining us on the leadership team. And we're going to start to expand the leadership team as well to some more individuals that we're kind of reaching out to. Very glad to have James on board. Our next monthly meetup will be May 22nd of 2024. So go ahead and mark that on your calendars, and you can find it on meetup.com. Our featured speaker will be Zen Zhang from the University of Georgia. He's in the Office of Institutional Research at UGA, and he's going to be talking about building dynamic dashboards in Power BI and how the process differs from Tableau. Apparently, their shop is in the process of transitioning from Tableau to Power BI. So this is something that is fresh in their minds. And he's going to be giving a talk about the process of building these dashboards, comparing one product to the other. So looking forward to that. And then we also have a June meetup scheduled for June 20th. Our speaker for that will be the one and only James Bartlett. He has agreed to talk about the Data Dojo, which is a concept that he came up with a few years ago, which is basically a Power BI community of practice, something that you can build across departments at your institution for promoting data literacy and other data skills. And I think that this is a great opportunity for those to get, if you're interested in a non-technical talk about Power BI, focused on building data communities with Power BI, it's a very good talk, no matter what department you're in or your skill level with Power BI. So after the meeting, as per usual, look out for an email from me containing links to our YouTube channel, so you can get recordings of previous meetings, Slack workspace, and forms where you can either submit an idea for a topic or speaker or volunteer to speak at an upcoming meeting, as well as RSVP links for our next meeting in May and again in June. I'll also say that James and Jeff and I are planning for some different events coming up in the future. One idea, for instance, was having like a happy hour, which is no set agenda, but just show up for an hour with the rest of the user group, whoever wants to attend, and have an open mic basically for any Power BI questions or other data related questions. And so we're thinking about scheduling that for sometime in the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned for that. And as always, we are looking for suggestions for topics. So please reach out to me or anyone else on the leadership team if you have a suggestion for a topic that you would like to see or a speaker that you'd like to see. With that, it's time for our presentation. So we are very lucky to be joined today by Carlie Laughlin. She is a sustainability analyst at the University of Miami, and she's going to be presenting on building a campus sustainability dashboard in Power BI. I got a chance for a quick sneak peek at this a while ago, and I'm really excited for what Carlie's going to show us. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to her. Carlie?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Let me just go ahead and I'll share my screen. All right. So this is going to be a presentation where I'm going to kind of go over this campus sustainability dashboard that I've built. And then I'll take all of you through how I got there to the final product. I am Carlie Laughlin. I'm a sustainability analyst at the University of Miami. I work for Green U, which is the Office of Sustainability here. So I wanted to begin by telling you all a little bit about, what Green U is. So as I mentioned, we're the Office of Sustainability. We lead all of the sustainability efforts on campus. We are overseen by the Facilities, Operations, and Planning Department here. Our office kind of came together all the way back in 2005 when we signed a climate commitment with Second Nature, which is another sustainability organization. And then we began putting out these climate action plans and sustainable operations plans with these, lofty sets of goals that had certain timelines included, certain metrics that we had to hit. But we didn't really have a great way of tracking those. Right now, we have a sustainable operations plan for 2035. And I highlighted a couple of the important pieces here, but this is just a snapshot from my notes of what our goals are. So right now, our SOP 35 is what we call it, is a roadmap to reaching net zero carbon emissions through different projects in energy efficiency, materials management, built environment, purchasing, waste diversion, water, etc. It's the result of pretty intensive collaboration between a bunch of different departments all across UM at our Coral Gables campus, which is our main campus, and the Rosenstiel campus, which is where we have the marine biology departments. And so a few of the goals here are represented in this dashboard. For greenhouse gas emissions, by 2035, we want to reduce by 90% from our baseline value. But then we have these short-term and midterm goals just to make sure that we're on track to reach that 2035 goal. Same for energy consumption, reducing energy consumption by 35%. Zero waste, we want to increase our waste diversion, which is the waste that we divert away from the landfill, whether that's through recycling, composting, donating, etc., to 90%. And we want to reduce our water consumption by 33%. Another goal that we have that isn't in this table, but that I indicated down at the bottom here, is increasing our STARS score. STARS is a transparent, self-reporting framework for colleges and universities to measure their sustainability performance. It was developed by ASHE, the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, with broad participation from the entire higher ed community. And the University of Miami currently has a gold STARS rating, which is the second highest. But we have a goal of achieving a platinum STARS rating by 2025. This is a certification that our university applies to annually. And so we wanted to be able to track that as well and track our progress within the different STARS categories. So some of the key questions that were being asked when I came on board about 2 years ago were, how is, our electricity, our natural gas, our water consumption changing as our building or as our campus continues to grow in population, as we're admitting more and more students, and in square footage? Which buildings on campus are consuming the most of these resources? Where do we need to direct our attention? How is our STARS score evolving over time? Where are we lacking? Where are we losing points actively? Where are we actively doing really well? Are our waste diversion initiatives successful? And what types of materials are we having the most success with diverting away from the landfill? And are we on track to meet our goals for greenhouse gas reductions? Are we on track to meet our other sustainability goals? I mean, we're investing a lot of money into these things, so we want to make sure that, we're hitting all of the metrics that we need to hit. And so with those questions being asked, I ended up putting together a dashboard, which I'm going to show you right now. This is the campus sustainability dashboard that I put together. It has two parts. One is this overarching, both campuses, our general data. The other part is our building dashboard, which is where we can really, zero in and see the details per building. So when we're using this dashboard, we can choose to take a look at energy. And here on the energy page, we see we have electricity, natural gas, and propane. And for each of these things, we can view the trend line of the resource usage from our baseline, which is 2013 as indicated in the Sustainable Operations Plan, for population as well as for square footage. We also have this electricity use per capita. So we can see, even as our electricity use increases, generally per capita, it appears to be going down. And per square footage, we have the same deal here. Then on this dashboard if we want to. We can also click and look per building. We can sort by building type. So if we want to look at all of the laboratory buildings on campus, which are listed right here, we can see which lab buildings are typically using the most electricity. We can choose the years that we want to represent in here. And it's the same story for natural gas and propane. Another use we have is tracking our water consumption. This is something that we can also look at per capita, per square footage, and per building. And again, this allows us to see that, you know, while our water usage does appear to be like increasing a little bit from this dip that we had, generally, we're seeing a pretty good trend of reducing our water consumption, even though we're bringing in more and more students on campus. We can also look at waste to help answer those waste questions that we had. We can see, you know, how many tons of each material each fiscal year, like where are these things going? So this line is for landfill. It's much higher than the rest, which is to be expected. But we can also see, you know, where our recycling efforts have really begun to pick up when we've introduced new recycling programs. We're able to see where we're introducing new recycling programs. We can see kind of like the dip from when COVID hit. If we want more information on waste diversion specifically, we can look and see the breakdown for the diverted materials by type. This past year, which we just finished uploading the information for, most of our diverted materials came from recycling, but we did just implement a pretty robust composting program at the dining halls. So what I might expect to see here is in, you know, 2023 composting, it said it was about what, 27%. Back in 2020, it was much more. It's not what I expected to see. But so then that, you know, that lets us ask further questions. Why is that? You know, we've established new composting programs. Why are we seeing higher rates of composting in the past? Is it because there were higher rates of composting for grounds as opposed to food waste, which is probably the case here, because we also compost our grounds trimmings. And then probably the most important piece of this for us is being able to track greenhouse gas emissions. With this, we are able to ensure that we're on track to reach our goal of decreasing our carbon emissions by, I think 90% it was, by 2035. So it explains here, you know, what it is that we measure. We try to measure as much as we possibly can when calculating our annual greenhouse gas inventory. And we're able to see here whether or not our programs are working. In 2022, that was the first year in which we had been able to source RECs to they kind of serve as carbon offsets for our electricity usage. So we purchased RECs from our local utility provider through their community solar program to offset, I think, the vast majority it was of our electricity usage on the Coral Gables campus, our main campus. Now you can see that that's going up. That's because the RECs were, I think they were just a set value. So as we continue to consume more and more electricity, we're going to see this begin to rise again. But there was a pretty significant drop here. We can also view our greenhouse gas emissions per capita, per square foot, like you can with the other categories. And then we're also able to break down our greenhouse gas emissions by scope to see which areas we really need to focus on here. Scope 1 emissions are emissions that arise as a direct result of our operations here. So that's fuels that are produced by our facilities, fuels burned by our university's vehicle fleet, emissions that might leak from refrigeration units. Scope 2, which is where we see that massive decrease, is electricity that we purchase from outside vendors. And scope 3 emissions are indirectly associated with our operations, but they are things like commuting, business travel, study abroad travel, and all purchases that the university makes. So this emissions by category page on the dashboard here really breaks it down even further. We are able to see, if we want to look at as percentages, we're able to see, the change that arose from switching our university over to solar. Previously, purchased electricity was, a pretty decent majority of where our greenhouse gas emissions came from. But now the majority of our emissions come from commuting. So the focus really needs to switch. The focus before was on, how can we save energy? But now the focus is really on, how can we promote alternative transportation at the U? It's on what measures can we take to ensure that, all of the travel that is taking place here for research, because this is travel that is taken by faculty and staff here, this large category for research. What can we do to mitigate the carbon emissions associated with that research? Mandatory carbon offsets for flights tends to be a little controversial at universities, but it clearly, if that's going to be, one of our next biggest categories of greenhouse gas emissions that we need to tackle, we know that we need to start conversations about that or about something to help mitigate those. We see that transmission and distribution losses, we didn't account for prior, but we began accounting for those. And then we also have natural gas taking up a lot more space now than it used to. So we know that maybe we can begin looking at carbon offsets for the natural gas that is being used in our buildings here on campus. Then I want to kind of emphasize this page here, where we can keep track of the goals that we have for our sustainable operations plan. We've already hit our goal for the greenhouse gas emissions that we set for 2035. We have achieved a 90% reduction in our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions as a result of the Solar Together program. We are on track right now to hit our goals for waste. We've already achieved our 2025 goal. And you can see, we're making steady progress towards the other goals. Our transportation goal is probably going to be the hardest one to hit because vehicles tend to have a really long lifespan and they are a huge initial investment. So we can turn over vehicles to alternative fuels or to electricity as they die and need to be replaced, but we're likely not going to replace vehicles before the end of their lifespan just to get our money's worth out of them. But for the most part, we're relatively on track to reach these goals. And then if we want to see, where our rock star buildings are or which buildings need a little more attention, we can take a look at the building dashboard. So this is a separate dashboard just because it's housed on a different place in our website. But when we click on this, it will open up this dashboard here. This dashboard is something that I think tends to be most used here at the university outside of our office. So it has an interactive map. The buildings are color-coded by type, and it allows you to click, drag, zoom in, zoom out. You can click on your building to get the data for your building specifically. So this is the business school that I've just zoomed in on and selected. We can see the business school's electricity consumption over time. This is by month, so we can see the seasonality of it, and water consumption. They don't utilize natural gas at the business school, so we don't see that here. But we can also look at behavioral data if we want, and this is something that we also tend to track on the back end to see, are buildings recycling as they should? Are people commuting sustainably? Are they purchasing sustainably? So those are the dashboards. When I was sitting down to create these dashboards, I had a list of information that I needed. I needed to know the annual campus population, square footage, a list of all buildings and building types. I needed information for annual and monthly resource consumption for both energy and water. I needed all of our waste, composting waste streams, recycling waste streams, donations, reductions from sustainability initiatives, and landfill. And I needed to know all of our annual greenhouse gas emissions streams, pretty much, what all is feeding into our annual greenhouse gas emissions. I got our data from, a few different sources. Most of it ended up coming from offices on campus here. Other data sources ended up coming from our utility provider, FPL. They work closely with Engie, so I was able to get those monthly reports sent to me. Waste came from a plethora of different resources that I had to consolidate in the spreadsheet. And then greenhouse gases came from SciMap, which is a software where I can import all of that prior information along with other information such as commuting, and it'll spit out the metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent for me. So I'm now going to show you the back end. This is what the dashboard ended up looking like. I have a bunch of different Excel sheets that are pumping information into this. The most fundamental parts of this were the building sheets, where I have a list of all of the buildings, their building ID, and their square footage, as well as the building category. So what's the building use? And then the monthly calendar, where I have it sorted by, calendar month, calendar year, but also fiscal month and fiscal year. And both of these connect to everything else. So I have, IDs, pretty much connecting with the IDs for electricity, water, natural gas, propane usage by building. And the monthly calendar is connected to all of these for our resource usage annually, as well as, our STARS score data, our greenhouse gas emissions data. And I try to keep this kind of arranged in clusters for my own sanity. But on the back end, I think it was, a little complicated initially for me to set up because I am self-taught at this. I kind of came into this without having formal training in Power BI. But I think it's relatively, I think, easy for me to understand now. When it comes to the building sustainability dashboard, it's much the same situation on the back end here. We have the buildings sheet with the building name and ID that I needed to connect to, the monthly utility reporting, monthly waste reporting, transportation, and purchasing, as well as that same fiscal year, fiscal month calendar. this is what the spreadsheet is going to end up looking like on the back end. So this is my buildings tab, building ID here, and then building category along with the names. For electricity, this is what it ended up looking like when I downloaded the different reports. I just have it set up in a table with the building ID, the month it's associated with, and the utility usage. For greenhouse gas emissions, it looks a little bit like this. We have it separated by category. The greenhouse gas emissions in metric tons of CO2 equivalent, the scope it's associated with, and the fiscal year associated with it as well. And then I've been talking a lot about this monthly calendar, and this is what the monthly calendar looks like for me here. We have the fiscal years, we have the calendar month, we have the fiscal month from the baseline value for the sustainable operations plan, as well as the calendar, the fiscal year quarter. And both of these are cumulative, just so we can track over time. For all of the icons, headings, etc. on the dashboard, I made it right here in Canva. Canva has a lot of really good graphic design functionality, so I was able to kind of tailor everything the way that I wanted it and download them, insert them into the Power BI dashboard. And then probably, I think, one of the most important steps that I'm still working on right now, so I'll kind of walk you through my thought process for it, because this is in progress, is automating the buildings. When I get monthly reports from our utility provider for the building resource usage, how can I just have that automatically put into the dashboard so it doesn't require so much hands-on work, pretty much. This is, applicable to the building dashboard portion of it. But basically, I get all of this information emailed to me with the building ID, the month, and the resource, whether that's electricity, natural gas, propane, or water. I can have that emailed to me monthly as a CSV file through our utility provider, triggered automatically. So I shifted over to Power Automate and decided to set up this flow. When an email arrives with an attachment and, the subject line for this, I just put water, but I would probably include a more specific subject line, like they have NG monthly water report. It'll trigger this flow. Then the flow will take the attachment from the email and place it in a OneDrive folder, just called water for the purposes of this. Then in between for each and refreshing the data flow, what I have yet to put in Power BI, but that I am currently working on, is creating a data flow in the Power BI service that will take the entire folder in the OneDrive folder water, combine all the files in that folder, and format the files into, the same structure of the Power BI data set, basically, that's feeding into the dashboard. Then we will append the newly created data, the combined files from the OneDrive folder, to the water data set, the master water data set that is feeding into the dashboard. Then to trigger this process, when a new file is added to the OneDrive, we have the refresh a data flow portion. So I don't have that in between part yet to show off to you, but that's kind of my thought process for the way it is going to go. This dashboard has had a lot of practical application here at the university. So the whole process of creating this dashboard in the first place has allowed us to see which buildings are not appropriately metered at all for utility consumption, both on the main campus and on the marine biology campus. On the marine biology campus specifically, there are quite a few buildings that just share 1 meter when they shouldn't be sharing just 1 meter, because then it's hard to tell, what's going on in each building specifically. It has also allowed us to see, which buildings do we need to target for future electricity, gas, or water reduction initiatives? Because as I showed you, we can go in and we can look at, which buildings, if we want to look at, all of the dorms together, we can do that because they have a similar, usage, a similar like building use. We can see, which dorms are consuming the most water. Should they be consuming that much water? Is there anything we can do? It's also streamlined our information collecting for STARS, SciMap, and other sustainability certifications that we apply for. Just because I had to go and think about what data needed to be put into this dashboard and then make a list of all the different places where I could get that data. Our STARS score increased by 11 points since implementing this dashboard, because we were just finding new areas of information to report on that we hadn't taken into account before. So it's a really, really good way of consolidating, all of your information streams. And now when I go into this dashboard, particularly for waste management is where we've seen the most impact with this. Our waste score skyrocketed in STARS since implementing this, because before we were really only looking at single stream recycling and landfill waste. But now we know, oh, there are different departments at that are actually donating a lot of stuff. There are different departments at that are sharing the stuff with other departments. There are people that are composting that we didn't know about. There are specialty recycling programs that we've been able to implement. A lot of different things. It's also helped to increase transparency and engagement with the campus community. So this dashboard has sparked a lot of interest with professors here at the U who have reached out to me to use this dashboard, its information, and like the base Excel file that we have for their courses. I have had professors in the School of Architecture use the building sustainability dashboard for their courses with students, and have students focus on different buildings in groups and learn what they can about the green building features for those buildings, and kind of like redesign it in a way to conserve the most energy. So it's gotten a lot of engagement, which has been really nice. And it's also brought awareness to our office and our initiatives on campus. And then, I want to thank you, but I also want to open this up to questions. I know there was a lot to go through, so I wasn't able to get too deep into any one thing specifically. So again, thank you very much. But if you want to know any more about, any one thing, please feel free to ask.
Thanks, Carlie. That was an amazing presentation, first of all. And one of the pieces of feedback that I saw was that this is probably one of the most sophisticated Power BI solutions that we've seen from a self-taught developer, and especially when you think your use of Power Automate and data flows, like you were bringing a lot of stuff together that I think maybe, a lot of self-taught Power BI, people don't even really think about, or don't know that they can utilize. So it's really impressive. We've got a bunch of questions in the chat. So the first thing I want to talk about is some of the data preparation. It looks like you relied primarily on pulling together this data in Excel first and then loading it into Power BI. Did you find yourself doing much with Power Query or anything else to transform the data, or did you just kind of load it into Excel and then load it into Power BI and go from there?
So, being self-taught, I didn't really know much about Power Query in the beginning. And the Excel file for this dashboard in its initial stages, and I think even still now might be a little bit messy. So it's pretty much went the way you described. I collected all of the information that I knew I was going to need. Then I put it into Power BI. I didn't do a lot of transforming with the data in Power Query. I knew what I needed to visualize. I come from a communications background, by the way. So I knew what I wanted to see visually on the page. And then if I needed additional data to make that happen, I would go out and I would source that data. There were also some people at the U that I reached out to help me with Power BI occasionally when it came to kind of formatting the data in a way I needed to achieve the desired visualization effect.
So James was asking a lot of questions, and one thing I think this kind of touches on the fact that you've got several dashboards all pulled together. Is there one sort of is there another dashboard that combines a lot of these visuals, especially like goals and progress, so that maybe higher level leadership at the university can look at just a single page view of how sustainability progress is going, instead of having to like click through like all 7 different dashboards? Is there one sort of primary dashboard that aggregates information from all of these?
Yes, so that is actually something that is in progress. I was approached by university facilities leadership because they did want something exactly as you're describing. The project, I think, was put on hold this semester just because we got very busy with other projects, but that is something that's in progress that I'm actively working on.
Are you planning to use the Power BI dashboards that you can build in the service for that functionality, or are you going to build like a brand new Power BI report?
It looks and it's going to look very similar to the way these look. It's going to be, a separate dashboard, but with it's going to have a lot of similarities to this one. Yeah.
I don't know how many of our members are aware of this, but there is a feature in the Power BI service called dashboards where you can pin visuals from different Power BI reports onto the dashboard. I don't know how much utilization that feature actually gets. It's a little bit of a divisive feature because it does some things pretty well and it's kind of cool in some areas, but in other ways it's very, very constraining on what you can do. But
Well, you've taught me something new today because I didn't know about that feature.
yeah, it might be one to look into, but it does have some limitations. One thing
Yeah,
I think a lot
if
of
I
people
might interject for a moment,
yeah.
the thing that the big deal about dashboards, from my perspective anyway, is that they can combine visuals from multiple reports. So if you have several different reports that are maybe coming from different data sources that maybe are targeted at slightly different audiences, a dashboard in Power BI can actually take visuals from those different places and put them all into one place. And the benefit to that is that someone who is, say, an executive or someone who is supervising multiple business units, you can surface visuals that will be visible to that person, and so that they can kind of look into what's going on in the business units that they are supervising and kind of see the high level overview of what's going on there. They're not really designed to be interactive, so you don't really like slice and dice on dashboards the way you would in a report. but they are helpful in that someone who is at an executive level or a leadership role can take a quick look at it and look at 5 seconds and figure out, okay, what do I need to do today? Who do I need to call and say, hey, what's going on with your this or that metric? And I liken that to the way that a dashboard works in your car. So if you're driving your car and you're driving down the road, you don't want to have to drill down when you want to see how how fast you're going or how much gas you have left. You want to be able to just go, whoop, okay, now I know how fast I'm going and how much gas I have left. And so that's how I distinguish between a dashboard and a report. A dashboard, it basically should just be something somebody can look at 5 seconds, know what they need to do to get back to their job. Whereas a report is more like you dive in, you do some some analytics and try to say what's the root cause of this problem, that sort of thing.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, James. One question that I think a few people had was they wanted to know which visual you used in order to create the building map on your building dashboard. It looked to me like a synoptic panel or
Yep,
visual or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So the program that I ended up using is OKViz, Synoptic Panel. It was a free service that I was able to download. You create the map in your browser. So you upload that base map. In our case, it was a map from parking and transportation. And then you can go in and kind of box out exactly, what areas you want to have boxed out and assign your building ID to them in the program in the browser, and then bring it into your Power BI report.
Yeah, it's not a visual that I've worked with very often, but it does have a designer website that you can use, put stuff together. People have used it for all kinds of things, like creating an interactive diagram of a car engine. And obviously, like interactive campus maps is a really great way to do it as well. So I figured that's what the answer was, but I wanted to be sure because you could also do some pretty cool stuff with like Python or something like that. But thanks for explaining on the synoptic panel visual. I did add a link in the chat for those who are curious to learn more about the synoptic panel. There's a little page where you can watch some videos and learn all about it. So another question we got was, how did you create the key column relationships between the tables so that you could bring the data from all of these different places into a single model? So it looks like you had them in your Excel file. Were these keys that you had to create yourself, or did they come from a facilities system and you had to put them in all the different tabs of your worksheet of your Excel file? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when you say keys, do you mean stuff like the building ID, like these linking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Building IDs.
Yeah. So the building IDs were something that all universities in their space planning department probably have a list of all of the buildings on campus associated with a specific building ID. I didn't come up with the IDs. They're already assigned to the buildings. And so that building IDs column is the link between all of the other sets of data here on campus. And when we get, like our utility reports from NG, the program that we use, all of those reports come formatted already by building ID or by building name. We can choose which one, but I found that building ID was easier. And so it just seemed like a simple way to kind of tie everything together.
So one interesting question, I mean, you're pulling in data from so many different sources and you're doing it on a fairly regular basis. Are there any plans to automate the processing of all of this data, perhaps by loading it into a data warehouse of some kind?
So the easiest automation is going to be what I'm currently working on, what I talked about with those monthly data reports. All of the other data, So for stars, for the greenhouse gas emissions, for campus population, campus square footage, and waste in particular. They come from different emails that I have to send back and forth on a regular basis, just trying to get more information. So I don't know how to go about automating all of that because the way I get that data is a lot more complicated than the monthly report that I'm sent. It would be nice, but I don't even know where I would begin.
All right. And let's see, I'm just scrolling through, and there's a lot of kudos for all the work that you did. A lot of things learned by people today. Any other last minute comments, Carlie, or about your
Yeah.
report or future plans?
Yeah, so I learned how to build this report by looking at other Power BI reports and, attempting to reverse engineer them. Fortunately, there are some other universities out there that have really nice Power BI sustainability reports. And I reached out to them and I said, will you send me your files? Like I want to build my own. So if, anybody in this meeting thinks they could learn something from the way I have my dashboard set up, I'm more than happy to share my files with you as well. So yeah, feel free to reach out. That's how I learned how to build this.
Thank you so much. We had a question about whether or not we're going to have this video on YouTube and or we're going to have it shared somewhere. And yes, we will. I've sent a link to our YouTube channel. I'll need to process the recording, but I should have it up there within the next 24 to 48 hours, usually. And so, again, just lots of congratulations and kudos and just jaw-dropping astonishment at the cool stuff that you built, Carlie. So,
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I think you've earned a lot of fans today.
And I will say the best way to connect with me if you have any other questions is my email, which I'll go ahead and drop in the chat here. It is carlie.laughlin@miami.edu.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Well, if there are no other questions, I think we'll wrap up. I think this was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Carlie, for joining us. Everyone should have her email address if you have further questions. Be on the lookout for a message from me with links to the YouTube channel, various other things. I'll have some blog posts about the latest Power BI updates. Look for this video on YouTube in the next 24 to 48 hours. And then don't forget to RSVP for our upcoming meetings in May and June. We'll have some more good content coming soon. And until then, everyone be well. We appreciate you being here. And we'll see you at the next meetup.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Carlie.
everyone.
Thank you.
You. Bye.